Welcome to another edition of Jerry's Take on China. I'm Jerry. Today I'm not going to talk about China. I'm going to discuss something that surprised many people about me. I was saddened when the Queen of England died. Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone who knows me knows I'm not a fan of British history. We've done some pretty bad things, but bear with me and I'll try and explain. I did surprise a few people a couple of weeks ago with a comment that I'm a bit of a monarchist. I got some support. I got some nasty comments, but I even lost a few followers. That's okay. I can live with that. I absolutely understand why people would be angry with a family that is born into privilege and wealth. And I'm certainly no big fan of what Great Britain has done historically. I'm ashamed of the colonization, the imperialism, as well as the money that was made from what are now illicit and illegal trades, such as slavery and opium. I make no excuses for my ancestors who raped lands and people. They delivered disease and destruction on the native peoples of many places, then took ownership of resources while exploiting and subjugating the people to whom those resources rightfully belonged. But should the current royal family be blamed for that? Personally, I think not. Should they give everything back? Absolutely, I think they should. Will they? I very much doubt it. But I do sense under King Charles there will be a shift in direction for the royals, and some aspects of the things that I've mentioned will change in coming years. My comment wasn't really about those things. It wasn't about monarchy. It was about a family that I had a great deal of exposure to when I was young. It was a family I'd been brought up to respect, idolize, perhaps even adore, because of the accident of their birth and the circumstances of mine. One thing I know is this: like them or loathe them, they do work hard. Now, if you're toiling in a factory, a construction site, in an office, in a shop, you might disagree. It's not hard work to go and open a museum, visit a hospital, meet with hundreds of people a day, and live your life under the public microscope. If you did it for a day, you might enjoy it. If you do it for a week, you'll tire of it. Imagine doing it year in and year out. They rarely get a holiday, since much of the travel that they do is on crown, family, or country business, and it's more of the same. I, for one, would not change my life for theirs, even if someone paid me £1 million. And if you'd seen their life up close, as I have, you probably wouldn't either. Stay with me for how that happened. Many people still love the royal family, but an increasing number are starting to dislike or even hate them. And I completely get both sides of the story. I want to explain why I have the views I have. If you are aware of the amount of tourist dollars the royal family generates and the number that adds to the GDP just by the sales of items related to them or with a royal seal, and how much work they do in charities or tourism they bring in, you may hold a slightly different opinion. You may still hate them, and that's your prerogative. My view of them is that while nowadays they certainly aren't a factor or a force in how the UK manages national or international affairs, they do add value to the country and they bring in more than they cost. They certainly aren't the parasites some people think they are. Contrary to public opinion, they do pay taxes. They're no different to any other corporation. They'll use tax managers and accountants to avoid where they can, but I'm willing to bet they never deliberately evade a tax, which would be illegal. Avoidance is quite legal. Anyone can do it. Evasion isn't. And if you get caught, you go to prison. I was 18 years old when I joined London's Metropolitan Police. My first week as a police officer after finishing the obligatory 16 weeks in the training school was June 1977. Now, to many people, that month won't hold much significance. But if you were in London, or pretty much anywhere else in the UK for that matter, you could not have missed it. It was the Queen's Silver Jubilee. Queen Elizabeth II had been on the throne for 25 years, and I was just 19 years old. Now think about that. She'd been there since before I was born, and until a few weeks ago, she's been the only monarch in most British people's lives. My first police station is no longer a police station. It was a Georgian terraced house that had been converted to a station in 1846. In all honesty, it was well past its use-by date, but it was quaint, and it had won prizes for its window boxes. That's about all I can say about it. A few days into my first week, I was told, "Don't come to this station tomorrow, go to Buckingham Palace at 11 a.m. You'll be working on the Queen's garden party." Wow, that was special for me. Of course, I knew where Buckingham Palace was, but I had no idea at the time there was a police station in it. I had to get instructions on how to find it, and I went there about 9:30 the following day, just in case. But not before calling my mum and telling her about my duties for the day. She got very excited because she was a very staunch supporter of Queen Elizabeth. What transpired the following day wasn't what I expected. I spent the entire shift standing outside the palace gates, directing traffic and allowing cars with the appropriate sticker to approach the gate and waving off cars that didn't have that sticker. What a disappointment. Calling my mum that evening was sad. She told all her friends that her son would be at the garden party. Over the next few weeks, I went to several more garden parties, and I even got inside the gates of the palace once. But there were a lot of other ceremonial events, like the beating of the retreat, the trooping of the colour, the changing of the guard. I had ringside seats at all of them. I had little or nothing to do with royalty after the Jubilee was over, except for from time to time being on duty outside Buckingham Palace during the changing of the guard. And this was something we all had to do. One notable day was fun. There was no parking, but tourist buses were allowed to stop and drop off passengers. This particular day there was no space. A bus went round the island and pulled up next to me. The tour guide got off and I saw it was my auntie. She'd seen me, told the driver to stop. She got off, she gave me a hug and a little kiss on the cheek, and I moved a couple of parking cones so that her bus could drop off the passengers right outside the gate. She got big tips that day because she had a group of American tourists who thought she'd just kissed some random policeman and got them a prime spot for the changing of the guard. A couple of years later, I was instructed to go to a hotel and wait on the door until Prince Charles arrived. It was snowing. He was due to attend the Household Cavalry Christmas party at 12 noon, so I was there at 11 a.m. I did a periphery check and I posted myself outside the main door in the snow. 12 o'clock came and went, 1 p.m. arrived. My sergeant wanted me somewhere else, but the inspector wouldn't allow me to leave. 2 p.m. came and suddenly his Aston Martin roared around the corner. The entire Household Cavalry Division and their guests were inside waiting to start lunch, and he kept them waiting 2 hours because he'd been visiting a hospital. He jumped out of his car with his close personal protection officer and immediately came to me and asked, "Are you okay?" I saluted like this and told him I was fine. I was freezing, but that's not what he wanted to hear. He asked me to wait a moment. What else could I do? He went inside and came out moments later with 2 glasses of whisky. He gave one to me and he drank the other. And I realized then it was the first time I'd ever met one of the family. But this was a man who cares about people. He kept his military party waiting because he'd been with sick kids. He was now keeping them waiting even longer because he was concerned about my welfare. After I finished my 2-year probation, I joined a group called the Diplomatic Protection Group. These are the armed police officers that you'd see outside of embassies and consulates. I was trained in the use of firearms, and for about 4 months, I had the incredibly boring job of doing nothing except showing a police presence outside of various embassies. One night, I received a phone call. "Don't go to your usual station tomorrow. Report to the police office in Buckingham Palace Mews." "It's my day off tomorrow," I said. "Doesn't matter. 6 a.m. start. Just be there." There'd been some kind of breach of security the night before and things needed beefing up a bit. So I got the job of being a security guard, armed, on one of London's most notable landmarks for a couple of months. I was doing very boring things inside and outside of Buckingham Palace. Occasionally I went to Kensington Palace or Clarence House where the Queen Mother lived. And during that time, I met Charles again many times. I met and chatted many times with Lady Diana Spencer. She wasn't married at that time. I met the Queen several times, and she always had a nice smile or a pleasant word for everyone. Prince Philip was a little haughty, well, at least with the staff he was, but he was always laughing about something. I met Princess Anne many, many times, and came to regard her as a very hard worker who never seemed to stop attending events. There isn't such a thing as a day off for people like her in the royal family. One time the Queen looked at me rather strangely. I put up a salute and said, "Good evening, ma'am," and she said, "Andrew, why are you wearing that uniform?" It wasn't the first time I'd been told I look like Andrew, her second son. And sadly, given the recent news media appearances, it's not a comparison that I like very much. I used to use a photo of Andrew with Xi Jinping as my profile picture on my WeChat. Many people would ask me, "Is that President Xi?" And my answer was always honest. "Yes, it is." No one ever asked, "Is that you with him?" But they believed it was. My time with the royal family came to an end the day before the wedding of Charles and Diana. I'd been on duty for a very, very long shift and was in charge of security for a grandstand which had been built in Hyde Park. The sense of responsibility that day was palpable. Every head of state was going to be in attendance for a huge firework party, and this structure, which had been guarded and checked by dogs, was placed under closed-loop management for several days. The last 24 hours, if anything had happened to those dignitaries, it would have been down to me and me alone. Now that's quite a responsibility for a 23-year-old. Shortly afterwards, I transferred out of central London and had nothing more to do with the royal family. But I guess through the Silver Jubilee and that royal wedding, I did have quite an interesting time. So I came to like the family that I knew. I liked the lady who was our queen. That doesn't mean I like everything that's happened in their name, and I hope people can get a different perspective of the royal family from my limited and very old experiences of working with them. And thanks very much again for watching Jerry's take on China, which wasn't on China, but I'd very much like you to like, share, and do the usual things with this video. I'll see you in the next one.